Hello, you in the pews and in the chairs in back, as well as you online who are taking part in the service by way of our Toledo Unitarians YouTube channel. I'm Reverend Tim Barger, the senior minister at First Unitarian Church of Toledo, but today I'm taking the service associate role because leading our service today and preaching is Reverend Sunshine Jeremiah Wolf, our congregational life contact from the Central East region of the Unitarian Universalist Association. It's not often that we have someone from the UUA come for a Sunday, so we're happy to welcome Reverend Sunshine, who led a workshop here yesterday and is preaching here today. I want to name a few more names. Jenny Gottman is our Director of Lifelong Learning, but she is away today, so our religious education activities will be taken by volunteers, with Reverend Sunshine giving us story time in the service. Jeffrey Maxey, our music director, is at the piano and directs our choir, including for a song featuring Melissa Jeter, our student minister. Walter McGee produces and directs our live streams, and we're so grateful that he does so much to have our technical presentations be the best they can be. And today he's joined by Andy Gottman operating cameras and Patrick Keys on sound. I also want to give a shout out to Carla Logan Mercer, our kitchen coordinator, who prepares our coffee hour, which I invite you to take part in immediately after the service. First Unitarian Church of Toledo is a liberal religious congregation, and we don't have a set creed, but encourage each person to know that we're all on spiritual journeys. It's a joy when our paths cross along that way, and we can help, support, and for a time accompany one another in our seeking and sometimes finding. And we can be together in our religious practice both here and online, and in our activities outside this campus, such as social justice work. You might learn a little bit more about us by looking at the materials in the pew racks. We have 6 items there at the moment. There's a yellow card that visitors can fill out and leave in the collection basket to get more information and help us know who comes here. And the card is for members too, as the inside part is an opportunity for you to volunteer your talents and or your interests. In the pew racks is a card with a picture of the chalice quilt that you see behind me. And on the other side are different ways to be in contact with us Toledo Unitarians. There's a bookmark, a card signifying that you made an electronic donation. That was really for when we passed the collection plate, which we don't do at this time. An envelope that you can use to make a cash contribution and have it recorded as from you, and a brochure about Unitarian Universalism, and there are different brochures in the pews. You're welcome to take any or all of those items. So, welcome again to First Unitarian. We're glad you're here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Reverend Sunshine Jeremiah Wolf, and he was mentioned in this song. Turn yourself up. Here we go. My name is Reverend Sunshine Jeremiah Wolf, and I invite you to join in the chalice lighting, which I understand your congregation will be saying throughout the coming year, as Reverend Tim lights our chalice. We are the Unitarian Universalists with minds that think, hearts that love, and hands that are ready to serve. Together we care for our earth and work for friendship and peace in the world.
And while we're reciting together, let's say the covenant of this congregation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Today, on our minds, in our hearts, and with our spirits, we think of our colleagues who are Jewish, both in religious practice and those who identify by heritage, and including some who combine their Jewish faith with their Unitarian Universalism. Yom Kippur, said to be the holiest day of the year, as it's the Day of Atonement, formally begins at sunset this evening and continues through sunset tomorrow. May we all find what is holiest to us, whether by calendar, by reason, or by personal experience. Important to the pagan people in our congregation, to all pagans, and to some scientists, as well as to others of us who make note of such things, yesterday was the autumnal equinox, the start of the season of fall. Some pagans call it Mabon, and it's a holiday as well as a recognition of harvest time. We're in a new season. Let's enjoy the character of this quarter of the year. I have the sad news of announcing the death of another member. It was reported to me that Marie Liggett died yesterday. Unexpectedly, but I'm told it was natural. I understand that there won't be a memorial service, but there likely will be a gathering reception of sorts in celebration of her life later. Congregation members and their families are held closely, whether it's separation because of travel, illness, or ongoing life challenges. We hope that you're helped by this liberal religious community. And we feel for our members who are facing legal trouble and hope they learn and grow from the experience, who are between homes and making moves to reestablish some independence, who are not where they expected to be at this stage of their lives. We hope that improvement will come for you. We're grateful that Reverend Sunshine Wolf, our field contact for the Unitarian Universalist Association, was with us yesterday and today. It's good to have connections to the larger church. Locally and nationally, we feel for our striking neighbors in the United Auto Workers Union, as well as others who are in tough union and management negotiations, including the writers and actors on strike and our friends at the Toledo Blade who aren't striking but are years past the expiration of their last contract. I'm a former member of the Communication Workers of America, and we have other union members in the congregation. Over the world, weather continues to be doing damage. Tropical storm Ophelia might be the latest, but floods and fires, hurricanes and tornadoes, more challenges of weather, of the environment, of climate change are now always with us. We also know that there are many among us with joys and celebrations. Share your happiness and know that we're happy for your good turns. You might have your own items for meditation, contemplation, and prayer, so we include the unsaid here. As we are in community, we can share burdens and be glad for accomplishments. We are together in fact and in spirit. And now please join us for our opening hymn. Today it's number 1010 in our teal hymnal supplement. Please join our choir for this congregational singing of We Give Thanks. And if you're willing and able to, please stand.
Precious day, for gathered here and this far away, for this time we share and love and care. Oh, we give thanks. give thanks for this precious day. We give thanks for this precious day. For gathered that is far away. For this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day.
I need some volunteers. Who likes to act out stories? Raise your hand. No brave souls. I need somebody who's relatively tall who's willing to pretend to be a tree. Come on up. I'm just going to hang out here on the level down here below me here. Just pick an end and be a tree. All right, I need some folks who are willing to, and don't do it yet because your arms will get tired. I've done this one before. It's wisdom from others. All right, I need some folks who are willing to be flowers or bushes or other kinds of plant life along a river. Anybody willing to come up? See, come on up. Anybody who wants to. I need a couple of folks who are willing to be boulders.
That suits you, Tom. That suits you.
I need someone who's willing to eventually pretend that they're on a swing. That won't happen until later in the story. Come on up. All right. And if you find yourself getting brave in the midst of all of this and just want to join us, please join us. So once upon a time, there was a river. You can imagine it flowing along here. And now it has an oak tree, giant oak tree that kind of gives all kinds of shade when it's needed and takes in all the sun. And along the river, there are flowers and rocks and plants living their best lives, soaking in the sun, soaking in the rain, roots deep, right? And then one day, a huge storm rolls in and a whole bunch of water falls, and the next thing you know, the river is flooded. And suddenly all those flowers and bushes like roll away, but not so far that they can't be at the end of the story. So go ahead and roll away off of to the side stage there. Imagine the water's going this way. And a couple of the boulders stay, but even some of the boulders get like shifted down a little bit. Can we imagine this flood? Yeah? Well, what happens after a flood? The water comes down, right? It recedes? Yeah. So after the flood, the water starts to recede. And what's underneath all of the water after it recedes? Mud. So you can imagine like, clumped around in mud and stuff. Maybe some of the plants are still there. Definitely the tree survived, though it's probably getting a little tired by now. Okay, good. Some of the stones are there, but a lot has rolled away. Now, the people who live near the river really miss what it was like before the flood happened. Can you remember all those flowers and plants that used to be there? They're not so far at the moment, so, but you can still imagine, right? And they really want to get back to a time when the flood never happened and start to plant things. And so they start to plant new plants. Sandra, I'm going to pick on you. Can you be a new plant that's planted? But the only problem is that the plant that used to be doesn't really work in the mud anymore. And so it kind of fizzles and dies. And then it rains, and because the water is still high and there's so much mud, guess what happens? It floods a little bit again, right? And even more plants and stones and things get rolled away. And so what the folks learn from this time is to not put anything in there yet. Until what happens? What needs to happen before we do that? Any guesses? Has to dry out, right? And we have to figure out what soil is there now, because new stuff got rolled down the river. It could be that those old plants that used to survive don't survive in that river anymore, right? And the rocks don't get to stick as easily as they used to. And everything's kind of a clean slate. Now I want you to imagine you have this river, beautiful oak tree that has managed to survive all of this. What might you want along the riverside? And remember, I'm hard of hearing, so shout.
Oak trees.
Oak trees, grasses, what else? Beach. Sand. Flowers. Maybe even a path, so you can walk up to the edge of the river. Maybe a bench or two. Maybe even a swing. You are a swing? So I want you to imagine that you're the swing hanging off of her arm, right? That you're going to be swinging off of the swing. You just stand underneath her arm. That's all it really means. Thank you. All right, and so then there's a swing. So there's some new stuff that wasn't there before, right? And then we start to figure out what plants actually work, and some of the plants come back now and get planted in the soil and start to take in the sun again and take in the rain and build deep roots. And now we have this lovely, lovely place. So I want to thank our storytelling folks. You are free to go back to your seats. Give them a round of applause for their excellent performance. If you're wondering why I'm telling you the story of a flood, I want you to think about the time of the pandemic when we were in quarantine as the flood. And that we are now in a time where we're still in a pandemic phase. We're still dealing with, things. It's not as severe as it was, but we're still in it. And so sometimes the waters rise and they still go back down and those kinds of things. And we want to kind of go back and plant the things that used to be there, that are familiar. But they don't necessarily work anymore. Or don't work quite as well as we'd like them to. It's because of all kinds of things. And so instead, if we let this be a fallow time, where we're really intentional about thinking what we want to put in its place, and when it's time, then we'll put those things in, we're better set up and prepared for the future to come. So as we're talking today, we'll be thinking about what does it mean to be in that in-between time, where we're not quite in crisis, but we're not quite out of everything. That's our story today. Thank you.
Let's sing for the children as they and their helpers go to religious education.
As you go on your way, may you be filled with gladness. Go enjoy. Make fortune bless your day with peace and loving kindness. Go in love. Go in love.
Bless you. All right. You're going to notice I do worship a little bit different. One is, bless you. I do the sermon in two parts. I do this because I worked in a church in the St. Louis metro area who had to spend a year without their religious education program for financial reasons. And so we had family church. And that meant that everybody was in worship together for about a year. And they started to get the resources back to start their religious education program again. And during the family church year, I would give the sermon in 2 or 3 parts because it's much easier for young folks to pay attention if I'm not talking for 20 minutes. Well, when we went back, everybody's like, yay, we're going back. But the adults said, it's really hard for us to pay attention for 20 minutes. Can you keep doing the sermons in 2 parts? And so I did. I continue to do it in 2 parts. The other thing is I love singing. And if we were in a religion where cantors were a thing, I might consider it. But today's sermon is going to be done with some music woven in. And at the end, I'm going to invite you all to join in singing with me in that. So It's based, a song that's written, the words are written by Reverend Dr. Rebecca Ann Parker, who's duly ordained United Methodist and Unitarian Universalist, and used to be the president of Star King School for the Ministry, which is our Unitarian Universalist seminary out in Oakland, California, of which I'm a graduate. And the music is by Elizabeth Norton. It's based in a Tonglen practice. It does not mean it is Buddhist. It is not. It is based on. Meaning that the folks creating it are not Buddhist, but were inspired by this. And it's based on something called Tonglen practice. In Tonglen, what happens is you think about something that is particularly challenging for you in your life at the moment, and you think about how you're experiencing it, what it makes you think, feel, how it feels in your body, and you breathe that in. And then as you breathe out, you focus on the kind of state you want in its place, right? Because the body is the ultimate sponge. And then in Tonglen, what happens is you pray for someone else, right? So you think of somebody else who's going through a similar challenge as you, and you breathe in that feeling for them, and breathe out what you want for them in their place. And then you breathe for all people like you, right? And actually what they say in Tonglen practice is you don't pray for all people because that's actually too general to be helpful. You actually want to pray for all people who are going through an experience like this. And then you always return to yourself and do that same prayer again. And so this hymn is based in that, and it starts with, there is a love holding me, and then as you sing it, there is a love holding you, us, and then it returns to me again. And so as I'm singing today, I'll sing it in the various parts, and at the end we'll do it together. And the first line goes like this. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding me. I must say that there are times right now where it's hard to connect to that feeling. It's hard to know that there's something that is holding me in these times of challenge and uncertainty. You'll notice I'm still masked. That is because my partner, if he were to get COVID, his chances of needing a liver transplant go up drastically. And he's a master's student who can barely afford his health plan, let alone trying to get surgery. And, you know, at the age of 49, going through all of that, not something he really wants in his life. And so I go through the world knowing I need to continue to protect my partner from the fact that I still have to work out in the world. And we're dealing with all of the things that Reverend Tim mentioned in the opening of the Minds and Hearts piece about multiple disasters, wars, this heightened conflict, which I feel like you in Ohio are uniquely placed to experience between Republicans and Democrats and hardcore religionists and folks who are trying to imagine something else. And, you know, it's just a really tense time. And all of this, when the pandemic hasn't quite faded yet, we don't quite know what's going on. Anybody else stressed these days? Is it just me? Right? You know, and so it's like, there is a love holding me. It's sometimes hard to connect to that. But here's the thing that I have to remember. That is a normal and natural and healthy response to the times that we're in. That it's actually a sign of good regulation that I'm feeling that way, that we're feeling that way, because things are dysregulated right now. They are wackadoodle, to quote my mother, right? So one of the things that I hold on to is my understanding and knowledge of trauma. And in trauma work, we understand that there's a biologic reality in the brain around what happens when we deal with stress. Our brain, our hippocampus, our amygdala, all of this stuff back here fires into high gear in those times of stress. And it can make it difficult for us to be thoughtful. It impacts memory. Anybody been feeling forgetful more than usual? Maybe even more than age allows, right? It can mean that you don't have the energy to do as much as you used to be able to do before the pandemic started, right? It's like you want to do the stuff, but the energy isn't there for it. Those kinds of things. And it's all a biological way that we respond to stress, particularly stress extended over time. And I feel like stress extended over years is enough time to be like, oh yeah, my body's getting dysregulated right now. Now, not everyone who's been going through these stressful times experienced trauma. I don't want it to be like that. It's not. Some of the folks in this room are like, yeah, I'm stressed, but I'm not feeling overwhelmed by it. Other folks are like, I just can't get through a lot of things right now. But when folks are in that trauma space, so specifically talking about that, it literally, in our brains, makes it impossible for us to access the Broca's area, which is where we access words, and our frontal lobe, which is where we create story. It's where we do logic, where we're able to think things through. It's the last part of the brain to form. Usually it finishes forming around the age of 25. Interestingly, it finishes forming around the age of 25, and guess what else happens at 25? You start aging. The aging process starts. You stop growing and you start aging. So it's like the frontal lobe is the last thing to develop, and then it's all downhill from there. So, you know, the brain is this amazing piece of our body, right? That helps us navigate those stressful times. And it's really important that we're able to tell that frontal lobe story about why that stress is happening, right? And there are 101 ways to tell stories. There are religious ways to tell stories. So, for example, using that Tonglen practice to kind of breathe and be intentional in creating connection to it. There's the scientific stuff, like this is how our brains work story. And all of that can give us a sense of stability, builds resources so that we can regulate ourselves. A wonderful reading by Reverend Elizabeth Mount. Used to serve in Indiana, PA, and now serves a congregation in Wyoming. And they write that co-regulation, not self-regulation, is in our nature. In other words, we are inherently relational people, right? I'm going to ask you to do a really brave thing right now. You ready? I want you to look around the room at the other people who are here. Give a wave, smile. The introvert's like, you want to do what? You don't have to look longingly at them. Just a quick look. A mild gander, right? This is a moment of co-regulation. Literally just looking at each other and saying, hi, you're here. You're not alone. And I notice there's more smiles right now than before I told you to do that, right? I want everybody to turn at the camera and wave at the folks on YouTube, right? You're not alone either. We love that you're here with us in this format, in this way. Co-regulation allows us to remember that we regulate with the earth through breath. We regulate through the seasons, through weather, through the touch of another, or not wanting to be touched right now, as the case may be. Even that is a co-regulation. It's a negotiation of space. And as we do that, we start to center down. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. Just that moment of saying, hi, you're there, and creating those stories helps get us around some of that stress. Doesn't fix it. It just helps us manage it a little bit better. Does that make sense? So I invite you, as you're going through the next week, to think about how are you helping build that kind of co-regulation moment in yourself, in the communities that you're part of, maybe even just a little bit, modeling it for Toledo and the world, who needs the message that, yeah, it's stressful right now, and you're not alone. It's real. And how you're feeling about it matters. There is love holding me. There is love holding all that I love. song for this service. That is from beautiful musical, and the line is, "You will be found." As we enter into this time of meditation or prayer or contemplation, according to your own practice, I'd like you to simply be present and in this room, or in your home, or in your car, wherever you may be watching or listening to this. You will be found. In this space, in this time of uncertainty and fear, struggle, anger, all of the difficult things that come up, those in times of trial, those in times of grief, may we hold them, may they know that there is a love holding them. And if it is you, then you know that there is a love holding you. If that source of love is from God or Goddess, it or they surround you, if that is from the love of family and friends, may that love surround you. If it is from that great energy of relationship and connection formed by humanity and all the beings of the planet, may that love surround you. For we are here to co-regulate, to manage a life that is constantly changing, whether it's wanted or not. In the great words of Grumpy Cat, the only things I hate are change and the way things are. And we lean into that tension of wanting comfort and consistency and being constantly tossed around like a beach ball unbreakable. And even as we deal with all that trial and that uncertainty, that fear, that anger, all of the messiness in life, may we hold on to the joy, to the wonder, to the laughter, to all that gives us great relief and hope. May we remember the touch of a loved one, the laughter of a child, the purr of a cat, the snarling play of a dog, the beauty of the earth, the sky, and all that reminds us to say, whenever possible, yes to the life and the world around us. May we know that we are not alone. As we are in this time of prayer and meditation, I invite you into a time of silence, that is a silence from within, for we not silence the world around us. If you find yourself getting annoyed by a sound in your environment, take it in and let it be a part of you.
Reverend Sunshine brought a reading from the book Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. What is emergent strategy? Emergence is the way complex systems and patterns arise out of a multiplicity of relatively simple interactions. I use these words from Nick Oblinsky because they are the clearest articulation of emergence that I have come across. In the framework of emergence, the whole is a mirror of the parts. Existence is fractal. The health of the cell is the health of the species and the planet. There are examples of emergence everywhere. Birds don't make a plan to migrate, raising resources to fund their way, packing for scarce times, mapping out their pit stops. They feel a call in their bodies that they must go, and they follow it, responding to each other, each bringing their adaptations. There is an art to flocking, staying separate enough not to crowd each other, aligned enough to maintain a shared direction, and cohesive enough to always move towards each other, responding to destiny together. Destiny is a calling that creates a beautiful journey. Emergence is beyond what the sum of its parts could even imagine. A group of caterpillars or nymphs might not see flight in their future, but it is inevitable. Oak trees don't set an intention to listen to each other better or agree to hold tight to each other when the next storm comes. Under the earth, always, they reach for each other. They grow such that their roots are intertwined and create a system of strength that is as resilient on a sunny day as it is in a hurricane. Cells may not know civilization is possible. They don't amass as many units as they can sign up to be the same. No, they grow until they split, complexify. Then they interact and intersect and discover their purpose. I am a lung cell. I am a tongue cell. And they serve it. And they die. And what emerges from these cycles are complex organisms, systems, movements, and societies. Many of us have been socialized to understand that constant growth, violent competition, and critical mass are the ways to create change. But emergences show us that adaptation and evolution depend more upon critical, deep, and authentic connections, a thread that can be tugged for support and resilience. The quality of connection between the nodes in the patterns, dare I say, love, and we know how to connect. We long for it.
You know what? Can you hear me? Yeah. Can we give a bit of an applause to our crew back there, sound, and folks doing the videos, Walter and Patrick and all that. I preach in a lot of congregations. I've just been very impressed with your tech, and I want to offer that gratitude. There is love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love. Resting in this love. trusting that cell after cell after cell has gathered to create the body in me and all the bodies before me. All of these intricate, wild relationships. And that we continue to thrive, not because we survived these crises. I think if we can think about what it meant to survive all of that quarantine time, the stress of that time did not feel like it was the adaptation that meant our survival. The adaptation that meant our survival were the gazillions of ways we found to keep connecting with each other, with our planet, with the challenges of our time. Emergent strategy invites us to consider the possibility that it's all of these creative interplays that are far beyond everything that we could plan to create new ways of being. Now, how many of you know emergent strategy or Adrienne Marie Brown? Is this familiar to some folks? Okay, good to know. So I want to say about Adrienne Marie Brown that first off, she is coming from the wisdom and experience, particularly of black women. The black woman herself, and looking at the resources and experiences of black women over the course of history, generation after generation, surviving some of the worst that humanity has to offer to her community time and time again. I will say as an indigenous human, I feel that deep in my soul, that I have inherited the survival, the adaptation of all the generations that have come before me. And it is wild that we're still here, despite every effort to say no. Communities keep thriving and surviving and holding close. And so I want to be clear that this is coming from a wisdom tradition that may not be yours, and to hold that peace as you're listening to what I'm talking about. And Adrienne Marie Brown created emergent strategy based on the works of Octavia Butler. Any sci-fi or speculative fiction fans in the house? Like, you know, Dune and all that stuff. So Octavia Butler wrote a series called Parable of the Sower, which, as you read it, feels a little eerily prescient based on the times we live in at times. And in it, it tells the story of a teenage girl who's growing up the child of a Christian minister in a world that is slowly falling apart and realizing she doesn't believe about God the same way her father. And she creates something called Earthseed, which is a religion rooted in this notion that God is change. And the line goes, everything you touch, you change. Everything you change, changes you. God is change. Now, I'm a religious humanist. I'm not a God-believing type person. But I personally, do understand how important change is to the natural order. I don't think you have to believe in a God in the sky to believe that change is central to how we make meaning and how we make connections. So if God for you is a real living being, thinking of God as change, great. And if it is not, then thinking of God as like central to how our world is. Does that make sense? Okay. So I may keep using theistic language even though I don't believe in God. That's just for ease of communication. Yeah. So we live in a time of constant change. We feel it, right? And there's things that we know about human beings and how we respond to change. And one of the biggest ones is we try to get back to sameness, to familiarity, even when that is distinctly not possible. And that part of the spiritual practice is not to look for the certainty, the solidity, but to actually lean into just flowing with the river and where the river takes you, rather than trying to resist the current. And if you've ever been lost in a river current, one of the things they tell you is don't resist it. You'll drown. Instead, go with it. Find something to help you float, right? Connect to your environment. That's your survival. We can learn from people who have learned what it means to just try and survive in this world. I understand this congregation is an 8th Principle congregation. For your first time, 8th Principle basically means this congregation is committed to countering white supremacy culture, emphasis on culture, to counter racism and to counter oppression in the world. And I want to take that one step further and to say that there is a wisdom that communities under stress, communities that are marginalized have, that the whole world needs to be listening to help us survive it all. And that's central to Octavia Butler's point in her stories, is that when we start to listen to the people who learn to live with the struggle every day throughout their lives for multiple generations, we find new and creative ways to survive. Because those communities didn't sit down and say, okay, we're going to sing songs and that's how we're going to survive. They just started singing songs. We're going to sit down and tell our stories over and over and over again so that when they try and make us forget them, they don't get lost. Nobody said, hey, that's a plan. They just did it. Emergence says we take what is naturally within our capacity to do and hold on to that and lean into it, rather than trying to force things to stay the same and familiar. To actually encounter difference between each other as the thing that not only helps us survive, but gives us that chance to thrive in this world and into all the generations that come after us. Does that make sense? So, thinking about this love that is holding us as the inherent change that we need. And thinking about how our brains get overwhelmed when there's times of change. The thing that we know that helps people navigate those times of trial is to tell the story up. I think one of the great powers of the Bible, even though it is not my holy book, is that it keeps telling the story of challenge. And it doesn't hide the bad parts. It doesn't just tell the good stuff. I have some real challenges with the not good stuff, but it doesn't hide it, right? One of the things that we see so often in communities in times of trial is that they try not to tell the story of what happened because it's too painful. But the congregation, the communities, the countries that tell the wholeness of their story are the ones that have great energy and great possibility and create new things. It is no accident that there are entire states trying to eliminate the history of entire populations in this country. Because there's a fear of that wholeness and what that wholeness would mean for change and transformation going forward. If they embrace those stories, then they have to change that sameness, that familiarity that they have long lived. And it isn't just, conservative folks in Florida who are doing that. We all have this tendency. If you find yourself resisting the story, one, take care of yourself. You don't need to tell everything right now. But also figure out how are you going to build the resilience so that you can tell the stories time and time again, along with all of the wonderful and amazing things. And that's how we reimagine communities. Is by telling the stories of what really happened and imagining and learning from those moments to create something that will be at once familiar and new, that is adaptive, that brings us hope and fulfillment, that engages the creative imagination to build the world we dream of. So when we imagine that love holding us, knowing that when it's feeling uncertain, when that amygdala is kicking off and we're all in our emotion brain, to know that we're still being held. That which is central to our core of understanding, a philosophy of belief, does not go away just because the world went to hell in a handbag, right? Before I conclude, I want to congratulate everybody on surviving the most recent apocalypse and still being here today. You've heard that story. There was a belief that yesterday was going to be the end of the world, and congratulations, you've been left behind. As we close out in this hymn, know that the world at large, particularly United States society where most of us reside right now, needs folks who are willing to lean into the difficult times and to practice that and to model that path. Because too often what is taught is the certainty of faith that tells you if you do this, then you'll be okay. And there are too many religions offering certainty. And I think that our capacity is to say, You can be uncertain and be completely whole and still get there. Yeah? May we share that wisdom with the world. There is a love holding us. I'm going to invite you, I'm going to sing a line, and you're going to sing a line after me, right? Let me say that one more time, particularly since the choir's practiced it. You're still going to sing the line after me? Don't sing it with me. You know who you are? It goes like this. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love. I rest in this love. Feel like you can sing that? Yeah? So, I've been sharing this because it's one of my favorite things. Reverend Fred Small is a Unitarian musician and minister and says, don't be afraid of harmony. Harmony is any note your neighbor is not singing. So if you're not singing the note, you're just singing the harmony. You're good. Right? I'm going to invite you to rise as your spirits and bodies alone. And we'll sing the second part of this, which is, there is a love holding you. And then I'll remind you, there is a love holding us. And then we'll come back to ourselves. Right? Sing with me, there is a love holding you. There is a love holding you. There is a love holding all that you love. There is a love holding all. Holding all. You rest in this love. And now we are up. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. Holding all. We rest in this love. And now me. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. Keep going. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love. Take one last look around at your congregation. This is the love holding you, this community. And you know they are here for you in all the weeks to come. Blessed be.
And while the choir comes up to prepare to sing the offering, let me give you some words for the offering. While we don't pass the plate, we still make a time in the service for the offering to let you know that there are different ways to give. You can capture the QR code or go to the donation page on our website or connect there by going to uutoledo.org, click on Give, and then click on Online Giving. You can give by using U.S. mail, sending a check to First Unitarian Church of Toledo, 3205 Glendale Avenue, Toledo, Ohio 43614. Or you here today in person can leave a contribution in the basket at the entry to the sanctuary. And if you're doing that, I hope you used this time, if needed, to write a check. We appreciate your contributions and honor your giving. We're a self-supporting congregation, as we don't get any funds from the Unitarian Universalist Association, but instead, like all other UU congregations, Support the association by paying dues. Please give what you can. And if your pledge is automated rather than given on Sundays, please consider adding a little extra to the basket. Thank you for your financial giving.
Reach out and touch somebody's hand. Make this world a better place. If you can, reach out and touch somebody's hand. Make this world a better place. If you can, just try. Take a little time out your busy day to give encouragement to someone who's lost their way. Would I be talking to a stone if I asked you to try to talk to someone who's not your own? We could change things if we start giving. Why won't you reach out and touch? Reach out somebody's hand. Somebody's hand. Make this world a better place. Make it a better place. If you can, I know you can do it. Reach out and touch. Reach out somebody's hand. Somebody's hand. Make this world a better place. Make it a better place. If you can, just try. If you see an old friend on the street and they're down, just remember your shoes could fit your feet. Try a little kindness and you will see that it comes so very, very naturally. We can change things if we start giving. Why don't you reach out and touch? Reach out somebody's hand. Somebody's hand. Make this world a better place. Make it a better place. If you can, I know you can do it. Reach out and touch. Reach out somebody's hand. Somebody's hand. Make this world a better place. Make it a better place. If you can, reach out and touch. Reach out somebody's hand. Make this world a better place. If you can, I know you can do it. Reach out and touch. Reach out somebody's hand. Somebody's hand. Make this world a better place. If you can, I know you
I keep saying, wow. I'll say it again. It's the coming soon part of our service where we tell you what's on the calendar for next week. We give some announcements, and we also let you know what's up for right after the service. And we kind of tag team this.
I've got it in front of me.
All right.
Next Sunday at 9:45 a.m. and the following Sunday, the Spiritual Forum will be in person and on Zoom with Michael Richardson, giving the second Sunday of a two-part fossil fuel divestment presentation. Details are in your order of service. Then for the 11 a.m. service, Reverend Tim will speak on In the News, Science. An ongoing effort this church year, he says, for him to turn to the newspapers and magazines to base sermons on the news and current events so the congregation can look at some of the wonders of the world we live in. Or, if not wonders, at least the goings-on and the current ways of life and knowledge and how what happens today is part of our religious living. We also want to give a pitch for the following week. There will be an animal blessing here in the sanctuary. So get ready to bring your pets, at least the brave ones, to their pictures if it's too much trouble to get the pets here on October 8th. So you can bring pictures if they're like, nope, I'm not around.
And now it's my turn to make some announcements. First is about child care here on Sunday mornings. We're in need of nursery and religious education helpers. We're not quite back to a curriculum and teaching Sunday school, but we are starting to get a few more children, including some very young ones who aren't good yet in groups. So Jenny could use some helpers. Please contact her. We may need to do some paperwork before you're on the schedule, so the sooner we start the process, the better. And I have an announcement about our upcoming church directory. Today is the last scheduled day for people's photos for the directory to be taken after today's service. Please ask in the lobby if you haven't already signed up. And if you haven't already confirmed your information with Tina Baker, who is leading our directory update, please see her in the lobby too. And if you're in our congregation by way of YouTube and would like to be included in the directory, please send your name, address, phone, email, and a picture to our church office by email to office@uutoledo.org or by postal mail. Plus, if you want to join our church as a member, contact me. And the final coming soon entry is for me to invite you to join us after today's service for coffee, conversation, and social time in Fellowship Hall. Reverend Sunshine will have to leave soon after the service because they have to go from here to Pittsburgh to Boston today, I'm told. So let's thank Reverend Sunshine for giving us this weekend, and may their travel be stress-free.
All right. So as we send our flame, we recite the words of Elizabeth Sell Jones, who your congregation recites throughout this year. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Reach out and touch somebody's hand. Make this world a better place if you can. Reach out and touch somebody's hand. Make this world a better place if you can. Just try. Little time out your busy day to give encouragement to someone who's lost their way. Would I be talking to a storm if I asked you to share a problem that's not your own? We can change things if we start giving. Why don't you reach out and touch reach out somebody's hand? Somebody's hand. Make this world a better place if you can. I know you can do it. Reach out and touch reach out somebody's hand. Somebody's hand. Make this world a better place if you can. Reach out and touch reach out somebody's hand. Somebody's hand. Make this world a better place. Make it a better place if you can. If you can. Reach out somebody's hand. Somebody's hand. Make this world a better place if you
Go in peace today.